So let me just introduce our panel. Bradley Horowitz is responsible for Google Plus and many other products, Google Apps, in his past careers. And apparently you do a headstand longer than Sergey. Is that true?
Handstand, yeah.
Handstand, yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
But only when he's here to challenge me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So is Sergey? No.
No,
Okay.
no Sergey here.
So next time.
Ben Treynor is responsible for all our data centers, infrastructure, networking, operations. Who's managing the store right now?
Robots.
One of the top jobs of every executive is to build a strong team.
Yeah, excellent. Great answer. And Brent Fried is got the enviable job of being the CIO of Google. And he
You
does
said that with sarcasm.
Oh, no, I didn't say it with sarcasm. We're joined by about 350 CIOs here and about 5,000 people on the YouTube stream. So welcome. We've had a great discussion today around leadership, imagination, products, lots of questions about many of those areas. So let me start first with you, Bradley. Google Plus. It's received, we had lots of fans here in the audience. So first of all, you mentioned we've shipped the Plus, we still have to ship the Google. So tell us a vision about Google Plus.
So yeah, Larry actually said that in the last earnings call. We've shipped the Plus, now we have to ship the Google. And I think it speaks to our longer term strategy around Google Plus. A lot of people, when they first saw Google Plus, recognized it as a social networking product. It had some of the familiar components. You had a profile, you had a stream, you had a social graph. And people said, I recognize this, I use this over in this product, or it's more like that product. And within a couple days, I think people had understood that we'd actually built something very, very different, that our own network had a very different flavor, value proposition, use case, differentiators, and that we had something very different and special on our hands. And we agree, we think that that's true. But what has taken longer for people to recognize and realize is that Google Plus is more than a social network. It's more than a product that's over here. We've had those before, Orkut and Wave and Buzz and other attempts where we build a social product. Some of them work well. Blogger is very successful and has millions of bloggers and hundreds of millions of page views across its properties. But this is different. And it's different in that what we aspire to with Google Plus is to really build a different nature of relationship with our users. Today, most users are coming to Google in a relatively unidentified state. They peck in a few keystrokes and they're off. And we pride ourselves on the fact that we can give a great result for something like digital cameras in 50 milliseconds and paint those results and the users click and they're off to the next place. But a lot of things in my life, I want a result fast, but I don't need a result in 50 milliseconds. If I type in mortgage to Google, I don't need a mortgage in 50 milliseconds. I need a mortgage next week or next month. And we don't have any way to understand our users in a durable fashion, where their interests like kite surfing or mortgage or their long-term interests, there's no place to put that at Google. And so in some ways, Google Plus is changing that. It's creating a means for users to express who they are, what they care about, who they know, and do it in a durable fashion. And we think when they do that, we're going to be able to return that value to them as improved services across everything we do. So search will get better, maps will get better, my phone will get smarter, Gmail will get better. That's shipping to Google. Once we understand our users, we're going to improve the quality of service for them everywhere. And some of that is consistency and coherence. Right now, if I share a Google Doc, wouldn't it be great if I could do that to Circles? This is an obvious integration between the two products, and it's not supported today. So I invest all this effort building Circles in Google+. I ought to be able to utilize that everywhere I go on Google and ultimately on the internet. But I think it's much more than that. It's more than just simple coherent gestures and interface mechanisms. It's deeper. It's really understanding users and returning that as value to them. And that's shipping to Google. And all of that is ahead of us, and it's the most exciting things we're doing.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Ben, let's start. Ben. Mr. Fried.
Yeah.
So I've heard you speak about this in the past. The role of the CIO is changing. Obviously, I was joking that hard to be a CIO at Google where You're surrounded by engineers who could do
Yeah.
it better. But generally, talk a little.
Who claim they could do it better.
Who claim?
They could do
Okay,
it better.
right. So talk a little bit about how you approach the role, since a lot of the folks in the audience would love to hear that.
So I think kind of the overwhelming force that's changed the world that we need to recognize and come to grips with as CIOs is, first of all, that the role of personal technology, of consumer technology, has eclipsed the enterprise in important ways, in ways that we need to take advantage of, and that we can, but all too often don't. So what that means from my role at Google is, everyone who comes to Google knows how to use some computer, software, the web, something like that. They've got an opinion, they're already productive before they got here, and we view our job as giving them the tool set that they want to use, that they've already made the decision will make the most productive, right? So this is reflecting kind of the wave of consumer technology and attempting to do that. And we do that in a way that's secure and meets kind of enterprise standards for things like manageability and security and price and all that. But one of the things we've discovered is that when you do that, it's actually, people are more productive, they're happier, and it actually costs less to support them, because since they're using the technology of their choice, they're their own first line of support. So whereas people typically say that's crazy, you give people choice, that's expensive, the reality is that the costs of doing that are lower than they would be otherwise. The other great, I think, reflection, the reason why we're all here today, why you all are here today or watching today, that has to do with personal technology, is the way that the rise of consumer internet services have fundamentally changed the economics of computing for the outfits that provide mass-scale consumer internet services, right? And Google and these other consumer internet services have access to a cost of compute, a cost of network, a cost of storage that we as enterprise users can never achieve on our own. And so one of the ways we think about IT and the role of my organization's role, is getting access to those costs of compute, those costs of storage, those costs of network, and kind of making that work for our organization. I think that these are the fundamental ways in which the job of the CIO has changed over the last few years, or will change. Astro was talking about people who want to live in denial, or things like that. I think you can't ignore the fact that people already know how to use computers, and they're not necessarily the computers we wanted to give them, and maybe they don't like it if you're giving them 5-year depreciation on laptops might sound great to an accountant. It doesn't sound so great when you give someone that 4-year-old laptop and tell them to go have fun, right? And similarly, we can put our heads in the sand and listen to the same old vendors who try to sell us software and over again over the years, telling us now that they have cloud solutions.
Fill in the blank.
Right?
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that if it doesn't have the cost, the cost of compute, the cost of storage that you get from these enormous consumer internet services like the ones that Ben Treynor's organization runs, it's not the cloud. And
I guess you run the cloud.
So it would seem.
So both of these gentlemen rely heavily on you and the services you provide, storage, compute. So tell us a little bit about how you think about managing these vast amount of data centers and computing capacity all over the world. What is the design principles and architecture behind that?
Well, a complicated question, obviously, but it's fundamentally about economics and SLA, right? We have a variety of different services. They have a set of user expectations that vary widely, right? On one extreme, you have things like the Google homepage or an enterprise application that people expect to be extremely reliable. On the other hand, you have some of the optional services, or you have things like YouTube, where the user experience is much more about streaming, and so the importance of any given packet making it to their computer actually doesn't matter very much to the end user, right? What they want is for their video to be served and played back at the resolution of their choice in a reasonable amount of time. And so they're very, very different requirements. And for us, it is paramount, because of our scale, that the economics be incredibly attractive, right? Whether you're hosting YouTube or hosting web search or hosting enterprise Gmail. And so the approach that we've taken to building both the physical infrastructure, the network, the data centers, the servers, et cetera, or the software infrastructure, is geared towards offering levels of service and offering them at a price point that is far better than you could get using off-the-shelf technology.
Talking about video, we had a Hangout earlier on. People were amazed by the kinds of things you can do with apps and Hangouts together. What was the thinking behind Hangouts, the product, and what do you see the future of video conferencing in general?
So Sergey told the story at Web 2.0 that he actually challenged the team to deliver on Hangouts, and he claims he was actually joking. We took him seriously and shipped. He was okay with that. You know, I think we're still learning, and one of the exciting things for us is to see all of the emergent behaviors that are happening in Hangouts, things that we never imagined would happen. We have reports of a surgery between a rural hospital and a major metropolitan hospital where a child was shot and they didn't have the expertise in the rural hospital. They got into a Hangout with metropolitan surgeons that actually coached them through the surgery. That happened within 10 days of launch. We've had experiences of things like concerts and musical instruction that led to what we're calling Hangouts on Air, which is currently in pilot, but eventually will deploy so that if you have an audience of more than 9 people and you want to share this with the world, we'll make it easy to do that through infrastructure. Already, people are using this facility. We had a concert with the Black Eyed Peas, and you know, so we're still learning. Obviously, Hangouts with Extras, which is bringing in some of these enterprise features like screen sharing, document sharing. People are already using these to change the way they work together, to change the way they communicate. And we have a laundry list of features that is really exciting. And the opportunity for us is to do active listening and really understand what is it that the world needs, and then triage those features and get to the most impactful, most important things first. But again, using the infrastructure that Google has developed over a decade means that we can provide this in an unprecedented scale for free to users, and it's something that is really thrilling to us on the Google Plus team to be the beneficiaries of what these folks have created.
So when you're doing a Hangout, I assume on the data center side, people globally trying to connect to a stream and in a web browser because it doesn't require much. I mean, how do you ensure availability and uptime at the scale with which you're delivering services with billions of users across the world?
So 2 of the main techniques that we use are defense in depth and soft failure modes. And so defense in depth is well, retrenched slightly. So at our scale, failure isn't a question of if or even when, it's a question of how much, right? You know, a fraction of your servers are offline at any given point in time, a fraction of your network circuits are offline at any given point in time, et cetera, et cetera. And your systems all need to deal with failures of individual points, even some fairly large points, gracefully, right? So you have defense in depth, you have backup systems, and you have n+1 or n+2, and you've gone and done the math ahead of time to say, well, the SLA, for example, for the network connection between the east and west coast of the US has to be 5 nines, right? Or more, actually, as it turns out. And you're not going to buy that circuit on the open market, but you can construct that circuit using routing and optical technologies plus software control. So you do. And similarly, right, in addition to defense in depth, graceful failure modes is very, very important. So suppose, for example, there's some catastrophe, big earthquake in the middle of the US, while people are in a Hangout. Well, you don't want the experience to be that everyone's Hangout goes away or that it goes away for half of them. If instead what you can have is everyone continues to run at half the resolution that they used to have, right? The user experience is still pretty good, and everyone, the marginal value delivered is much greater for everyone if they have the functionality, albeit slower or lower quality, rather than no functionality.
Yeah. Ben, I'm sure you deal with these types of topics as you've built fairly interesting systems that we use internally. Talk a little bit about your philosophy for building new systems that Googlers are using.
So when I was talking to Google about this job a number of years ago, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that the founders, the leadership thought of IT as another part of Google engineering, and that kind of the same rules of the road that would apply to, that they wanted to apply to how Google built products, they wanted it to apply to the systems inside Google as well, right? And I thought that's an interesting challenge, right? I love Google products. That seems like that would be fun. So it kind of, the rubber hits the road there, I would say, in a number of ways, right, and that vary widely. One is we try to be first best user of enterprises' products, and that produces a whole bunch of interesting benefits and kind of creates a great relationship with the product teams. There are also cases where our internal systems need to reflect the realities of being Google that others don't have, and that creates a whole bunch of interesting challenges. I mean, for example, we get an insane number of job applications every year in the many, many, many millions, right? And as a result, we also, you combine that volume with what I believe to be a unique cultural approach to how you hire, how you measure talent coming in, and how you make decisions about hiring. So we've built all of our own systems for managing the applicant tracking process. And in fact, we just rebuilt all those systems for doing that and flipped the bid on all Googlers last Monday, which has been interesting for any of you.
It's pretty good, Ben.
Yeah, it's good.
So anyway, but the appetite for being able to do those sorts of things, I think, is really interesting, and being able to do those things in a way that tests kind of where enterprise wants to be and where our cloud platforms want to be is unusual.
And have you settled on a platform to do this on?
So the first choice platform is, as I was saying, App Engine. It's not always the only choice. There's some cases where you need to do things, but if I had to give one piece of advice to someone entering the IT game, the first piece of advice would be don't do it on premises. Yeah. Unless there's some reason for which you have to, don't do it on premises at all. And it's really very clear. Sadly, the world of the CIO is one where it's like a technology roach motel, right? Applications come in, but they don't go out, right? There's always someone, right? There's always some damn stakeholders. No, you can't take that app out. I need my 3270, or whatever the case may be, There's always something, right? And what this means is that the operational costs of all of those I'm never giving it ups add up, and we as CIOs have relatively little room to maneuver to do new things because you're carrying, it's like the old man in the seat, you're carrying all these costs. And the great thing about App Engine is those costs go way, way down. For all the apps that we've written on App Engine in the last 3 years, there's kind of 24 or 25, we just counted enterprise class apps that we've deployed that run on App Engine for Google to kind of solve Google's own IT problems. Just written by my organization, not including volunteers or anything like that. And in order to support those apps, like I haven't had to add one sysadmin, I haven't had to add one network engineer, I haven't had to do one operating system patch, I haven't had to do one network operating system upgrade, I haven't had to manage one data center failover, all those problems that add up to the infinite cost of adding anything into your IT environment, we don't have when we choose to use these technologies.
I see. You hand them over to me then.
Precisely.
Yeah. Ben, can you do that?
You said something about leadership teams and all that, and yeah.
No, I mean, you illustrate a very important point, which is that I do them, but I do them once.
Exactly.
And then everyone benefits, and so there's enormous economies of scale.
Yeah.
And this is the point I was trying to make about the reflection on the economies of scale that you create as a result of the unique challenges of the business environment that we operate in, right? And so the thing is, even the largest enterprise is minuscule in comparison to the demands of being a worldwide consumer internet service. And as a result, it's very, very attractive to us. We get these phenomenal economies by taking advantage of the innovation that comes from supporting the entire world's use of technology.
For those of you in the audience, feel free to use the mics, ask questions. Those on the live stream, you can put it right on our Plus page. We'll try and get those in. So Bradley, this is an enterprise crowd, so I'm sure you're expecting this question. And I speak for a lot of people who've pulled me aside and say this is the best thing since sliced bread. What's the roadmap for enterprises for Google+?
So recently we announced that a subset of use cases and a subset of customers, those with what we sort of internally call vanity domains, things like dave@gerard.com, could finally get into our product. And that was exciting, and we've seen tremendous uptake and celebration over that. But we do recognize that that doesn't meet every use case and every need. There's also this concept of intra-enterprise sharing, where instead of circles like friends, family, and cycling club, I would have circles like the IT department, the marketing department, or even sub-teams, the research department, things like that. And one of the things we do extensively here is dog food our products. We try the products out internally in this internal use case before we launch them to the world. And so we at Google actually run an instance of Google+, which is an internal instance that we use for this sort of communication within the company. And so we can speak definitively that this has transformed communication within the company. Many things that would have previously done on email or wiki or other sort of sharing mechanisms now happen much more effectively on Google Plus and the internal instance. So we recognize the demand for this use case. We see it and use it every day. So I want to share that we're working on that. We understand it would be important to be able to drag a chip into the share box that isn't public, but is public to my organization within the firewalls of my organization, or departments, circles that are departments or sub-teams there. So that's something we are working on and are excited about and can know from our own experience will transform businesses worldwide. That's probably the news that folks here are most excited to hear. In the meantime, despite the fact that we don't have that use case ready and nailed yet, we're stunned and amazed by the use cases people are inventing and working through the product, from organizations getting their own Plus pages, and I hope every organization here has taken the time to create one, to the use of Hangouts, sort of ad hoc, rather than use some of the alternative internal video communication tools. People are finding that Hangouts just works, and you just need a web browser and a web connection, and they can get together with their family. Why not their coworkers as well? So yeah. People are discovering that the product as it exists today can meet some use cases, but we're excited about really providing the value that we know you all are expecting, and we're working hard on that.
That's great. Question here from the audience?
Hi, Ron Lapidot, Perils International. As our user community goes and on their personal lives go and adopt Google+, how do you bridge the gap of having a corporate identity and a personal identity and multiple circles? Any guidelines around that?
We recognize that the problem exists out there. We're actually working on that. In one sense, the notion that your identity is segregated, people have seen as a feature. And the fact that I can have a different skinning of my Gmail account versus my personal Gmail account versus my corporate one, and really segregate those things, can be perceived as a feature. Alternatively, it can also be a tax that I have to sort of log in twice, either use the multi-login feature or separate browser instances. There are times when I actually don't want to do that. I think we want to understand people as people and understand that they have different facets of their life, and circles are an excellent mechanism for representing that. So we have some ideas about how to solve this problem. It's not a short term. You shouldn't be waiting for this to get started or expecting this to land in Q1. I think it's a deep problem, and we need to tackle it in a deep and meaningful way. So over the course of 2012, I think we'll make progress on this problem, but it's not something that should stall your adoption or that we are going to sort of fix before we get some of the facilities I mentioned out to you guys.
Thank you.
Great. Another question from the audience?
Yeah. This is Sandeep Suryavanshi. I'm from Zensar Technologies. My question is about Google Plus interfaces. In an enterprise, you would need to have lots of internal applications which would also be interfaced through the collaborative portal. And to generalize, you could have notifications and small transactions, parts of functionality which is deriving out of the enterprise applications, available through the interface if you have powerful APIs. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. We absolutely concur. I mean, notifications, the ability of your organization to utilize that channel to communicate to your audience, your people, is self-evident. We're complete believers in that. In terms of our APIs, you have seen us take a relatively conservative approach. We have the read APIs to market today. Eventually, we'll augment those with the write APIs. And we're doing this because we want to build a product that compresses what the market has learned over a course of 10 years really into a matter of weeks. And we're thrilled by the early success. We've been in market less than 4 months now and have huge adoption. The last public number we've reported is 40 million users have signed up for the service. That was 3 or 4 weeks ago. Seems like ancient history. We're building this for the ages. And we understand that things like games, for instance, or even APIs can impact a user's experience of their stream. When anyone can inject any content in there, it can be a bad experience for users. And so while we're moving at light speed and launching on a weekly basis, there are some decisions that we want to be thoughtful about. What are the right controls that a user can put in place to control and attenuate the noise and the broadcast that's coming at them in the stream? So we're committed to doing this. We've announced that we will be doing this. I think that the rules of engagement are slightly different in the enterprise, and I think you have a captive audience in a way that if you decide that you want to use that notification channel as a mean of distributing corporate information, it's sort of less damaging than if a game developer decides they want to spam you and all their friends through that channel. So I think we can have different rules about what constitutes good usage for enterprise and consumer accounts. But the reason we don't have a fully activated platform on consumer is that we want to proceed with an abundance of caution and make sure we don't make some of the same mistakes of our predecessors in terms of polluting the stream and diminishing the value of the platform for the primary communication needs that we're serving today.
Thanks. Just one added question to that. I mean, in a sense, you're looking at SOA including the cloud into it, with maybe not just one provider, but for an enterprise, maybe there'd be multiple providers. So would you be taking that kind of a consideration in mind while designing the Google APIs, the Google Plus APIs? And because for an enterprise, there is, I mean, I may not be using only one cloud platform, but
right.
could be multiple. And they could be in-premise, they could be on the cloud applications, and they could be interacting with each other. So it's a pretty complex scenario.
Yeah, we definitely recognize that, and I think we have some good experience with that from the work we have done previously, both in the social space and more generally with our approach to APIs. We recognize we live in an ecosystem, and we have tried to be as standards and protocol compliant as possible and as open as possible. I think, again, given that we've been in market, really publicly launched about 40, 45 days, I don't feel too bad about telling you that this is not yet ready, but philosophically, you'll see Google adhere to the same principles you've seen with previous efforts.
Turning topics for a bit to data centers again, and I'm actually really excited about what we're doing in the green space and how that impacts how you really build data centers, how you manage data centers. Could you talk a little bit about our investments in that area?
Sure. So I think here it's interesting. We have both a obvious and non-obvious component, right, to our interest in green technology. So the obvious component is economics. If you looked at the standard colo-style data center of, let's say, 10 years ago, right, you would see that roughly of every 100 watts that went in, about 50 of them would make their way to the server board, right. And the other 50 would go to powering, right, the cooling, the transforming, right, et cetera, et cetera. And these days, it's fairly routine to see that, of 100 watts that go in, 80 to 85 of them make their way to the server board. And that's economics, right? And so a lot of what we've done in the data center have been purely selfishly motivated. We want to reduce our costs, and we want to make our data centers more energy efficient and more operationally efficient. The other is somewhat more philosophical, right? We as a company have put out quite a bit of press about our green initiatives and green philosophy, which I don't want to repeat, but at some level this is more aspirationally self-interested. Data centers provide a set of services that, absent them, you would spend a lot more energy and generate a lot more carbon emissions and other environmental damage to obtain, right? Sort of the classic example is we talked a while back about how many cups of tea can be made with a Google query, or as it turns out, how many Google queries you can make with a cup of tea. But what was missing from that discussion was very important, was that absent Google, right, absent a search engine, absent those data centers, what you would have done in the old days is gone and found this amalgam of ground up tree, which somebody had used ink to print on, and then you would hunt through it, right? And everybody kept a collection of these in their house. And that was normal, right? And there was, if you will, one of those failures of imagination, that maybe you don't need to keep a dated copy of tree amalgam sitting in your bookshelf in order to get the answers to questions. So it's hugely more efficient to have a data center that stores this information and makes it available to everybody, when and where they want it. And the power that is consumed by data centers then is far lower than the power that would be consumed if you used an alternative mechanism getting this. But it's still in our best interest to ensure that that power remains available for the foreseeable future, right? If anything, we will find other places where you can substitute power for a more traditional mechanism of either delivery or information transfer. And having renewable energy sources and having them become less expensive over time as economies of scale and as R&D proceed is very much in our interest, but it's also in all of our users' interest.
Talking about failure of imagination, what's been the biggest failure of your imagination?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I can fail to imagine in spectacular fashion.
Right here on stage.
So I think for me, and maybe this is, I was joking about this a little earlier, but one of the things that I had a hard time imagining was a company as willing to accept kind of transformation as Google is. And we don't always necessarily go down with 100% happiness doing it, but we're not afraid to kind of make radical changes in technology if we think it's actually going to make the place better. And there have been a couple of times when I failed to imagine that I would actually have the support needed to go ahead and do some radically different things to my colleagues, yet there it is, I've done them.
Fail early and often so we can try again.
Yeah. Like the failure to imagine the corporation's ability to accept change, which is what I would say. And I think that it's very easy for me and for other people kind of who sit in a seat like me to not want to go that way and not want to kind of sign up for big change. But actually, doing it's pretty good. Doing it is worthwhile.
We're going to try and imagine our failures over a glass of wine, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Why stop at one?
Yeah. Why stop at one? Well, that's the summary of this talk. I hope you enjoyed it. We thank the panel. As you heard from many of the speakers, the time for the social mobile cloud is here. I think many of you see it. Many of you see the leaders present in the room, actually creating incredible value for enterprises around the world. So with that, thank you for attending, and I'll hand it over back to Jonathan.
Thanks so much, Amit. So out of a day of arresting images and ideas, I can't help but think of the peeling sticker on the server at CERN, which said, "Don't unplug, this is the web," which, of course, at the time it was written, may not have meant that much to anybody about to unplug it. And to think of the ways in which, from an unexpected corner, thanks to the raw infrastructure that you could set something up on a mountaintop and wait for people to come visit you and replicate it on their own as well, you can go from something that starts as an app and then becomes a platform and then just becomes sort of the water in which we swim. And there have been a number of examples of that in the world and discussed today. It emphasizes to me the importance of having saturating, good bandwidth internet pretty much everywhere. I'm off to demand that GoGo in flight not be taken off of airplanes. And the ways in which, almost as a matter of national and international policy, it can matter so much to have that kind of infrastructure, and that we're really just in the first couple years of what's going to be a multi-decade build-out of the possibilities that flow from that. And I have no doubt that the next great advances will be coming as often from unexpected quarters as from those who think they've got all their ducks in a row. Along those lines, too, it made me think of intranets versus internets and its initial use, maybe even still today, its current use, as a technical matter, something around which there is a firewall and it's just an internal network. That's an intranet. And then realizing that that technical definition maybe doesn't capture both the ability over an internet to create structures that parcel out with whom you want to share something, with whom you want to work, and to create groups and communities that aren't just all or nothing, self or the entire world. That intranet is kind of a state of mind, and one we'll be working through very much, probably in time for so many changes coming in labor and employment, and in the structure of getting work done. That more and more organizations will be outsourcing, not as one fell swoop of one particular function, but they'll need a little help here and a little help there, and be turning to the world at large, facilitated by the internet, to make it happen. And to see the prospect of tools that can build teams on the fly and let people enjoy that kind of flexibility seems to me to be meeting the moment in which we have a workforce that, a work model that expects it, and a workforce, of course, that expects it. I think for many people, their first encounter with email was at work. And then it turned out their first encounter with email now is, I guess, like when they're 2. I don't know. When do you get people started on email these days? Facebook, you're supposed to wait for a while, but email, you might as well get going immediately. So these are the kinds of things that I think show us that 10 years from now, things are going to look a hell of a lot different, and makes the job that pretty much everybody in this room is in one that promises great challenge and great fun. It's not just the same old, whether or not the actual money flow feels open or constrained. So can I just say it's been a wonderful day. It's been my pleasure to be a part of it. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you later.